And the Lord said to Abraham, leave your country, your people, and your father's household. In almost every piece of literature, from the Bible and Genesis specifically, one we just referenced before, to the Lord of the Rings, there is always a call to adventure. If you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling bored and a little bit uncertain about the future or your present circumstances, perhaps one thing that your life is missing is an adventure. One way to find adventure is to move and live in a different country, and that is what I want to encourage you to do today in this video. Hi, my name is Ben. 5 years ago, I moved to Thailand, and in this video, I want to encourage you to move abroad and live in a different country. Let me begin by laying out some of the benefits that I think I've felt and I've had from moving abroad. Later on in this video, we'll look at perhaps some of the difficulties, some of the challenges, and we'll come to some kind of conclusion. Ultimately, what I want to do in this video is to lay out my experience, some of the things that I've learned from moving abroad, and some of the reasons why I think that potentially it could be a great exercise, a great trial for some of you to do as well. Maybe you were in a similar position that I was a few years ago, like I said, feeling a little bit down, a little bit confused about what to do in life. And if nothing else, moving abroad is a pretty big adventure. It's pretty challenging. So the one thing you're not going to feel is bored, at least if you do take on something like that. So let's have a look at some of the benefits. So some of the reasons why you should move abroad. The first thing I've got written down in my list of reasons to move abroad is experiencing a new culture broadens your own views on life and makes you question long-held beliefs. You've probably experienced this yourself if you've ever traveled abroad, ever been to a faraway place. You've probably given yourself a window into a different way of life. You see people living very different life to yourself, very different ways of being compared to your home country perhaps, and you do get a little window when you travel or when you go on holiday abroad. The difference is when you live abroad, when you move for an extended period of time and you live and you work and you fully immerse yourself into a different culture, that window expands and it becomes a much bigger, much more immersive window, and you get to really step into it and feel how it feels to live in ways you didn't really know people lived. It will challenge your beliefs. It'll challenge what you think you know. It'll make you reconsider a lot of things that you sort of pre-assumed about life. Seeing different religions, seeing different types of jobs, seeing different ways, political system, structure. It all really broadens your horizons, makes you reassess, makes you really reevaluate the beliefs that you already had, which I think is a really refreshing thing. And self-reflection is really beneficial, especially like we said at the beginning of this video. If you are feeling like uncertain, feeling anxious, feeling maybe depressed a little bit, having that time to reflect, having like prompts that force you to reconsider certain things can really help you straighten out your sort of understanding, sorting out your feelings and emotions, maybe experiencing new religions and seeing different ways of worship, and all those different things can really have a major change, a major shift in how you're feeling, and I think ultimately can make changes for the positive. Obviously maybe you could change for the negative as well, but I think if you're switched on and you're looking to improve yourself, moving abroad and experiencing new cultures, getting really engaged in them and giving yourself enough time to sort of fully appreciate them and fully see certain things that you won't get on the layer. If you just come for a short time, you'll get like a sort of layer one or level one kind of view or a little window into a different culture, into a different country. But if you stay for a long time, then you sort of sink down and you start to experience even more. You're more immersed into it all. And I do think that is where real change is possible, which is something you may be wanting to do, wanting to experience. Second on my list of reasons why you should move abroad is you will almost certainly experience personal growth from the different experience of moving to and adapting to a foreign country. Traveling to a foreign country, as you probably know, is difficult. Living and working in a foreign country is really fucking difficult. I'm going to be honest with you. There's a ton of challenges, especially if you go far away, especially if you go to a place where English isn't spoken that much at all. Things like just getting a bus, getting a taxi become really challenging because you can't speak the language at first. You may not even recognize bus stops or taxi stops or how they work or how they operate and how to interact with those things. And we're talking about extremely basic transportation needs. When very basic things like taking a taxi or a bus to the supermarket is a massive challenge, you can obviously imagine how much bigger of a challenge holding down a career or a job is. So moving abroad is extremely challenging. Where that becomes rewarding is, I think that doing difficult things makes you a person who can do difficult things, and it encourages a lot of personal growth. You become someone who was capable, you will become someone who moved abroad and was able to work. You became someone who saw out something very difficult. You encountered problems and challenges every day, and that can only make you stronger. Facing daily challenges really does build your character, helps you become less stress prone. I found, when things are less reliable, especially if you move to a country, maybe the infrastructure is not reliable. That was certainly true in my case. I had to get used to sometimes the electricity cutting out, sometimes there not being water in the house without warning, and maybe for like a whole day you have to come up with solutions to like pretty big problems that can affect you day to day. Like I said, getting a bus, getting a taxi becomes difficult. When I first got here, recognizing like which was a restaurant and what they sold was really difficult again. And hopefully you will find friends who can help you and guide you while you're doing this. Obviously the internet is a massive resource these days as well. It's kind of ripped away the veil that traveling would have had in the past, but it is still extremely challenging doing just basic things. And as things become more complex, as you've been here longer, you start to engage in more complex activities like buying a property, buying a motorcycle, all those kind of things, changing jobs, doing more difficult things, then the difficulty increases as well. So you're going to be really challenged if you move abroad, especially if you're working abroad, and especially if you're living here and spending a long time here, you're going to be really challenged. And the good thing about that is, if we're going to look at it through rose-tinted glasses, that it probably will actually have the outcome of making you a much stronger person. So that is another great benefit of moving abroad. And finally, moving abroad potentially will benefit your career, gaining international work experience and possibly language skills. So yeah, it's probably not the main reason or the main benefit of moving abroad, but something else that potentially will crop up is you'll bolster up your CV. You'll have a load of international work experience. I think that looks very interesting on a CV. You'll probably also develop some level of language skills. If you spend an extended period of time in a foreign country, you're probably going to at least get something. Maybe you'll develop quite a reasonable amount of language skills, which again is something great that you can put on your CV, and it's great for personal growth as well. Getting experience in different countries, different industries, seeing how companies work in different countries is definitely invaluable for going back to your home country even, and just being aware of different methods of doing things. And once again, those language skills may surprise you when they come in handy. Now, it's not all rosy. Life is not a bowl of peaches. There are obviously great challenges with moving abroad, and maybe we could lay a few of those out. I don't want to give you just a one-sided story. I do want to encourage you to move abroad, but I also want you to bear in mind some of the sort of challenges. So I've thought of some of the bigger challenges, and they are culture shock, language barriers, and homesickness. To be honest, when you first get abroad, when you first made that big leap of faith and you've landed in a foreign country, especially if it's still a very new country to you, you'll probably be completely overwhelmed and excited, and you won't experience any of these sort of negative emotions. However, they will potentially begin to crop in a little bit later down the line. That's what happened to me anyway. So the first one we mentioned was culture shock. And culture shock's a little bit of a weird thing. Like I said, when you first get to a new country, you'll probably be completely overwhelmed and exciting and very interested in the differences in culture. However, when you're living in a different place, it can make you feel a little bit alien. You can start to feel like a little bit of a black sheep, like you don't really fit in, you don't really understand a lot of what's happening and the reasons why they're happening. So yeah, it can be a little bit alienating at times. My only advice, if you are experiencing a lot of culture shock and really struggling to understand and feel like you're not really fitting in well, one thing I might suggest is try and figure out the reasons why, or the reasoning for the things that are making you uncomfortable, the things that are the biggest culture shock to you. One way of doing this, probably the best way to try and figure out and understand why, the reason why, would be to ask someone locally. So if you've got a local friend, perhaps you could just lay it out to them pretty openly and say, look, this is something I don't really understand, I don't really get it. Could you explain it for me, and why? You probably have a better understanding of the reasons why and where this comes from. And maybe if they explained it to you and you begin to understand the why, even if you don't agree with it, even if it's something that still shocks you, still you really just don't get it, it sort of upsets you maybe a little bit. Once you understand it, once you understand people's reasonings for doing it, you become more accepting of it, and it becomes less of a shock, becomes something you know the reasons why, you understand sort of the thing behind it. So yeah, it becomes a little bit better to accept, and you also don't feel like alienated from it either then, once you have a little bit of understanding. So that's probably something that I would recommend. It's something that has helped me in the past as well, when I've been experiencing culture shock and just been bewildered by something. Having someone and just sort of asking that question sometimes does help. If you're unfortunate, maybe you're very new, maybe you don't have that kind of friend just yet who's local and who can explain it to you. It doesn't have to be a local person. Maybe you could find another foreign person who's lived here for a long time and they could break it down for you. But yeah, don't forget, you live in 2023. You probably have Google in your pocket, so yeah, you could Google it. And I'm sure if this is something that's shocked you, something that you feel you need answers to, I'm sure you're not the only person, you're probably not the first person, and you're probably not the first person to look online, so maybe there'll be answers in blogs or in chat forums, Facebook groups. Yeah, check out all those places. Maybe people have asked these questions before you, and perhaps there are good answers and good explanations for you to find online also. When it comes to the language barrier, this can be a really big thing, and this can be a real challenge, to say the least, when you move to another country. Don't forget, if you're going somewhere where your native tongue isn't spoken at all, if you're in an area, let's say you're coming from an English-speaking country, and there aren't that many people who speak English in the town you've been placed in, or maybe you found work in a remote town. Going to a restaurant can become a great challenge and something that you just don't know what to do. Getting like a taxi, like I said, basic transportation needs, basic food needs, it can be a real challenge. You won't know what's in the food. It can be all sorts of hazards. And obviously this is something you should expect. It's probably something you are expecting moving to a different country, obviously. However, it can be surprising how big of an obstacle this can be in certain circumstances. It is a big challenge, but it's also a great opportunity to perhaps begin to build some new language skills. So you can start to plan your phrases. If you're going to a restaurant, learn the food you like, learn how to order the food you like, and you build from there, so you can start to pick up some of the language. And if you have some of the words, then maybe you can get some of the order correct and that kind of thing. So yeah, trying to see it as an opportunity for personal growth potentially is a great way. And also, once again, don't forget, you live in 2023. The Google Translator app, for example, is pretty good. It even has a camera option, so if there's like a menu, you could take a picture of the menu on your phone, run that through the Google Translate app. I'm sure there's other translation apps. I just use the Google one. And yeah, you can select which text you want it to translate. Now, if you're living in a country with a very different alphabet and all that kind of thing, it's not perfect. It's all right for like single words, I find. However, if there's like sentences, sometimes it gets them pretty off. But you with sort of basic language skills and combine that with the applications and Google translators, then yeah, you can get pretty far. So yeah, that would be my optimist view on ways to handle or get a grip with the language barrier that you will almost certainly experience moving to a different country. And finally, I did mention homesickness. So once again, this is sort of a big negative emotion that can sort of whack you from time to time when you're living in a foreign country. It's certainly a challenge you're probably going to face at one time or another. Maybe you don't. I do definitely. It comes and goes. For me, it's pretty bad around like holidays, that would be holidays back home, and sort of family occasions like birthdays. I get pretty homesick at those times, and it's not uncommon. It's pretty common, especially like I said, when you first get here in your first month or so, you're really excited. Everything's very overwhelming. It's all great and exciting and engaging. But yeah, you will start to miss home, miss certain things. When you're challenged with all the challenges that come with living abroad, you'll get real sick for home. You'll be wishing you were back there when you have some really sort of bad interactions, or you get stuck trying to do something. So yeah, it is something that you probably will experience if you do move abroad. When it comes to homesickness, I don't really have like a perfect cure for it. Like I said, I still struggle with this myself on some occasions. It's pretty rare, to be honest, but it does hit me at times. The occasions when I find, so like at Christmas, on birthdays and that kind of thing, one thing I probably recommend is try and like have those holidays anyway. So try and make sure you have a Christmas dinner if you can arrange some kind of Christmas dinner, and invite your friends, and especially if you can get some friends who are local to the country that perhaps doesn't celebrate Christmas, you can welcome them, and that can be a rewarding experience and would probably knock out any sort of feelings of homesickness. And again, for your birthdays, maybe you can get some drink or foods from your home country that would make you give you some of those home comforts to sort of counteract the feeling of homesickness. For me, like getting some British ale or some Scottish whiskey for my birthday, that definitely helps alleviate some of the homesickness I would potentially be feeling around that time. And once again, look to technology, because video calls are readily available now. Probably everyone in your family, probably all your mates back home, they probably all have I'm going to assume they probably all have an iPhone or a smartphone at least. So you can video call them, and that can do a great deal of good. Probably schedule it, get like a weekly video call in with your family and friends, and do that kind of thing, because that does definitely alleviate homesickness for me. I hope that gives you a good idea of some of the great reasons why you should move abroad, but also a little bit of some of the challenges that you're probably going to face. So despite all the challenges and occasional discomforts, living abroad is a really rewarding and character building experience. So do your research, pack your bags, book a plane ticket, and go and spend a few years in a different country, and turn your life into an adventure if you're in a position to do so. I chose to quit my job and move to Thailand, and if you want to know that story, then I'll leave a link to the video right here. It should be on the screen just there. So yeah, click that if you want to know that story. Cheers.